Open all the sodas you need to right now because that was really loud in my ear. All right.
So this is our camera here, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And then you guys can see yourself right.
All right. Can you zoom in at all, bro?
I just gotta get some clips right.
Teresa doesn't like that chrome lamp, the chrome titty in the room.
I'm looking at the Christinas Story lamp though.
We just put that there because we didn't want people seeing our TV. I mean, we do live in a really quiet neighborhood, but you never know, anybody driving by see it.
There we go. Beautiful.
One second.
I don't even know where to start. Oh my
I don't
god.
know if you want it like right here, because if you move it, it'll make noise in the.
No, I'll sleep back over there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm just gonna be listening, guys, and I get this. No, thank you. I appreciate that.
No, you're good.
All right, fellas. We are pre-recording already, so whenever you guys are ready.
All right. Magic, just Victor.
Yeah, either
just
way.
remember
Yeah.
microphone.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's another thing too, guys. Try to speak in front of the microphone.
Yep.
Once you move your head.
Right,
away
right.
from it.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. All right. So we're already recording.
Yeah.
Teresa, we're quiet. All right, everybody, it's your boy Manny Salgado with another edition of Manny's Mexican Minute. This time we're going to stretch it out into a big moment because we have a very special guest. We have Victor Rivers, a.k.a. Magic, as you may know him. Or I remember Victor from one of my favorite movies, A Million to Juan.
Millions of Juan. There
A
you go.
Million to Juan. How you doing today, Victor?
I'm good. I mean, glad to be back in Illinois. I have a little bit of a history here. It's the first city I lived in when I moved to this country.
Yeah, you were saying
not Rockford, but Chicago.
Sure,
So
sure.
I learned to speak English in Chicago with the nuns. They.
Oh, wow.
So
Did you go to a Catholic school? Or?
I went to Catholic school.
Which one did you go to?
I went to the one I can. There were two that I remember. One was called St. Columkill, which I think is still there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the other one was called Our Lady of Mercy.
Wow.
And so I do remember both of them. And so when I arrived, I didn't speak any English at all. And so little by little, I learned English. But I remember I moved from the tropics, and so I was suddenly in snowsuits all day.
Yeah, I bet that was a shock, right?
It was very, very cold. But yeah,
A lot of Latinos go through that, you know.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
It's
yeah.
something that doesn't get talked about a lot.
that's
'Cause
right.
It can be a shock on the
our,
system.
Our blood is different.
Yeah. So you are Cuban.
Yeah.
So you came from Cuba straight to Chicago?
Straight to Chicago, and then so I have a history in Chicago for 7 years, and then I lived in Los Angeles for about 7 years, and then I ended up in Miami, Florida. I went to high school, and I played college football there, and I was out briefly with the Miami Dolphins for a couple of preseasons back in the late 70s.
Wow.
And if I tell people what I played, they go, "What?" I was an offensive lineman, and today all the offensive linemen are 6'6", like 300 pounds. So
I heard that your nickname was the Mad Cuban. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And
I
how
got-
did that come about, or what happened?
So I grew up in my home, and well, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. And I've actually been to Rockford in the past as a speaker. I've spoken for one of the domestic violence shelters here in town.
Sure.
And so I grew up in a lot of violence in my home. And this was at a time where my mother didn't speak English, but more importantly, women didn't. There were no hotlines for women back then. There were no shelters for women, so we were pretty much left to care for ourselves in the situation. And so I grew up with a lot of violence. So when I was playing college football, my teammates they nicknamed me the Mad Cuban because they said when I put a helmet on, you could see that I would change personalities.
Wow.
And so I had all that violence that I needed to get out. But fortunately, it got me out of the gangs because I was in a gang for a short amount of time. The biggest difference in my gang life in today's world is we had no guns.
Sure.
So it was mano a mano.
Yeah.
And but
The good old days.
yeah, but athletics and also my high school, they took me in. They gave me 7 homes to live in. I was, I ran away from home. I was, gang member, 6'2", over 200 pounds, angry, but little by little they were able to transform me from a gang member to the president of the high school.
Oh, wow.
And then, and that's in 2.5 years of just having the right type of intervention.
Sure.
And so that's one of the reasons that I speak on on our the issues of our community, violence in our communities,
Sure.
because we're not born bad or violent.
No, it's a learned behavior.
It's a learned behavior. But if my story tells you anything, is you can unlearn the behavior.
Correct.
So when people ask me about magic, as an example, they say, like, where did you find him? Well, one, I could have been him.
Sure.
The reality, I was heading that direction. But I also I lived with somebody who was that much of a menace, but only on the only on the inside of the house, not to the outside world. He was perfect gentleman, handsome, friendly.
Sure.
But I lived. My father was pretty much a monster.
Sure.
That I grew up with. So that's where the title of my book comes from. It's called A Private Family Matter. That was that's what the police told me at 12 years old when they sent me home.
They couldn't get involved.
They just said we can't do anything. It's a private family matter.
Sure.
And that's the day I went home and I sat my mom and my older brother down at the kitchen table and I said, if I get a gun and I shoot him, will you back me up? I was 12, and they didn't say yes, but their eyes did. So I went out looking for a gun. In my neighborhood, that at that time was a white middle class aerospace community.
Wow.
In LA today, it is a Latino, community in LA, and
Sure.
it's gang infested. So I could walk next door and get a gun.
Sure.
I might be telling you a different story. So there's a reality to working on this film and being in San Quinton Prison.
Sure.
Because that's certainly a place I was heading. And I got to see what real incarceration looks like, and that's why I always tell people we seem to have billions of dollars each year to build more and more state-of-the-art prisons, and we're most of the people that are being housed in those prisons are black and brown.
Yeah.
And but we don't have the money to invest in our schools, and the free music and arts and dance and even athletics. And so,
Well, it's
how
kind
do
of
we
crazy
change that?
how a lot of those institutions are owned by the same people that own the colleges. I don't know if you know about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and one way or another, we're being institutionalized.
Right.
And we're trying to break that gap here. Really quick. So, football. Do you think that was a form of therapy for you? And did you ever encounter any other forms of therapy? Have you ever, myself, I have PTSD, and I found EMDR to be very, very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And, with us Latinos, mental health is not a big thing. So,
Right.
Other than football, what other ways did you, how else did you do?
Well,
all that?
football did. I was a really good baseball player,
Okay.
and so I had options to go to college as a pro or to go pro. But football gave me this healthy outlet for my rage. So that was really a great form of therapy. And because of my athleticism, I've always maintained a real discipline to physical fitness.
Sure.
And so that's also a great form of therapy, especially now because I do yoga and I do other things that can calm you. But I will say that I think all of us encountered different forms of mental illness during COVID because we were isolated for about 18 months where you couldn't see each other's faces.
Right.
A lot of times you were isolated in your home on top of that. And so I think mental illness became a subject that people started to talk about a lot more.
Way more,
And that's actually the first time that I did formal therapy.
Oh, wow.
I started because, I was at home and I said, okay, and so I was doing it, Zoom, Zoom therapy. And yet I thought I had kind of gone through everything and really done well in my life and all that. But I still had like shadows and things that I had to take care of. And that's something that especially men, but especially Latino men,
there's a stigma. There's a
and
thing.
and also we're told, and I'll use the example of my mom. This is years after she was retired, and she was no longer she hadn't been with my dad for decades or whatever, and but we as her children, she had 6 kids, 5 survived. I had a brother who didn't survive, and we told her, said, Mommy, you should go talk to somebody. You've been through so much. And she goes, no, eso para los locos.
Para los locos, yeah.
Because her generation, if you went to therapy, the next thing was they were going to institutionalize you. And so we have to, because one of the great killers of men in our country is suicide.
Yeah.
And it's because we won't talk, and we won't talk to our brothers, we won't talk to our our
We
guys
got pride to get in the way.
Right.
It's a huge stigma
Right.
that we need to break.
So that's part of the my journey as a man, and certainly a man in the movement of trying to end violence in our homes and with our children and our women, is how do we redefine manhood for our young boys and men?
Sure.
Because our boys are still being taught that don't cry, don't be a sissy, don't be a girl, and so you're asking boys that have kind of the same emotions
Yeah.
to stuff those emotions, and so how does it going to come out?
Yeah.
And it eventually will come out in violence, either against themselves or against someone else.
Right.
So that's why we have to continue this conversation and let people know that all of us, even the ones you think are the tough guys,
Yeah.
because I've obviously played a lot of tough guys. I was a college and professional athlete. I've done a lot of different things, but part of my journey is discovering what it really means to be a man.
Sure.
So
No, speaking of this conversation, what led you to get, or not what led you, we know what got you to those steps to getting involved, but how is it that you finally got involved? Did somebody reach out to you? Did you find an organization you fell in love with? Because you are a speaker for an actual organization, correct?
yes, I'm. They've made me. I'm the
Spokesman?
national spokesperson emeritus, so I'm sort of for life for an organization called the National Network to End Domestic Violence,
Gotcha.
and they are out of Washington D.C. and all of the state coalitions, including the Illinois coalition,
Yeah.
falls under our umbrella.
Right.
So then we help to they work on legislation.
They're very active. Yeah.
Funding. A lot of people don't know this. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you vote on, but a lot of people don't know that when he was Senator Joe Biden, now he's President Biden, but when he was Senator Joe Biden, he wrote the Violence Against Women Act, that has helped create a lot of money and shelters and legislation to end violence against women in our country.
Nice.
But the way that I got involved was I had a friend of mine who was a publicist, and he said, you got all these films coming out and whatever, and he says, you need to get attached to something, like a cause, because that's great publicity.
Yeah.
And that's not who I am. And so, but I listened to him at lunch, and I went home that day, and as karma would have it, I got home, and there was a magazine that I subscribed to, and I opened it up, and right at the page that it opened up to
Always a sign, right?
was a full page ad, but it was a young Latino woman looking back at me. Her name was Christina, and she was telling her story about domestic violence and this organization that helped her.
Wow.
And it was the National Network to End Domestic Violence.
Wow.
And so I called my friend back right away, and I said, I think I found it.
Did the tears start rolling?
Yeah,
Did you have
and
one
so-
of those coming to
and
life,
so
coming to
then-
God moments?
But remember, this is over 20 years ago, and so when we think about domestic violence, we think of it as a woman's issue,
Yeah,
not
no.
that it's not a man's issue. And so he called the woman who was the executive director at the time, who later became Congresswoman Donna Edwards,
Oh, wow.
and from Maryland. But he called and he said, "Do you have a spokesperson?" And there was a new organization, and she goes, "No, we don't." And he goes, "Well, I have one for you."
Great.
And what was her next response?
Who
is
is he?
she?
Oh,
who is she? And he goes, "No, it's a he." And so it took great courage and vision by Donna Edwards to make a man the first spokesperson for this organization that was being misconceived as only a woman's issue. So they had a man who was going to stand up and talk about this issue as something that also happened to him as a child, but also to encourage, because back then Congress, it was a boys' club. I mean, there were women in Congress, but it was really a boys' club 20 years ago. Now it's much better. It's not evened out, but it's
Sure.
we have a lot more female representation in Congress, which is a good thing.
Sure.
So that's how I got involved initially, and then I had a platform already from speaking, and that's where the book came from. So the book was just another. It was a way for it to reach a lot more people, and I know my book has been used in high school reading groups. It's used in therapy a lot,
Sure.
especially therapy with men.
So, speaking of the book, that book came out how long ago?
2005.
2005.
And interestingly enough, it's just a little side note, but my publishers, which is Simon and Schuster, which is out of New York, but the imprint for my book is called Atria Books. Danny Trejo's book just came out and it's the same. It's the same publisher.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
So, speaking of that, can we? Do you have anything else in the works when it comes to books? Any other books?
Well, I don't have
Part
any other
two?
books, but the book is currently. I have 2 other executive producers. So somebody came to you, an executive who wants to do something with my book. So
Nice.
we have written a limited series. So
Okay.
we're actually shopping it right now with
Beautiful.
Netflix and Apple TV, and so
Beautiful.
to make it like an 8-part limited series, because it's going to have an ending, because
Sure.
my story hasn't come to an end yet, but
Right.
we'll so
That
that's
was just the beginning. It's time.
so
to
yeah, so this is where
follow
we're
that.
at right now with that, and then hopefully if it gets done, I know it can it can make a difference out there.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of making a difference, first off, you're in Rockford, Illinois, because you're going to be with us at our event this weekend. As you know, it's a benefit for our nonprofit. We're trying to make an impact here in the Rockford community, in the greater Rockford region. It's definitely hard getting out there and getting involved. It's definitely gut wrenching sometimes. But what advice could you give to somebody? Here when I do it on a personal level and try to get people involved, I kind of have to make it fun in the beginning, but once they start seeing like the nitty gritty of nonprofit and how it all works, what advice could you give to somebody that's wanting to make a difference in the world?
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of times we leave it up to our leaders to create change, but change really happens is at the ground level,
Correct.
and so it's all of us.
Yeah.
And again, my story is I know that we've all heard the saying, the African saying, it takes a village to raise a child.
Correct.
So I'm that child. So I had a community that in high school decided they were going to make a difference. So I lived with 7 different families. There was no foster care. There was no paperwork. It was just people, making that investment.
Sure.
And so I'm the end result of that investment. And so that's how we create change. We, like a lot of times we'll sit on the sidelines and and especially in today's world with, I'm much older than you are, there was no social media. There was none of those platforms, which is a good thing because we can get this out.
Correct.
But there's also the bad thing about that is that you can sit at home and bitch and moan to everybody and say really nasty things about other people and whatever, and you don't even have to put your name on it.
Yeah.
And so we're in a place right now where we're divided, but because we're allowing ourselves to be divided by politicians and by media.
Correct.
And so we have to find a place because we're not that far apart.
Right.
We're not. I'm in my immediate family. I have very conservative, members, and I have very liberal members, and we always come together.
Sure.
It's like we're maybe that far apart.
Sure.
And so I think we have to. I would just
Once
say
people communicate, I think a lot of those barriers come down anyway.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of having the respect to be able to talk.
So if we're having a discussion,
Right.
we can get things accomplished. If we're having an argument, nothing's going to happen.
Bingo.
So that's
Bingo.
right there. So if we're at this tone, we can talk. You can tell me something, and I may not agree with you, but I can say, okay, well, let me tell you what I believe. But again, I think if we're working towards the common good,
Yep.
then it's going to benefit all of us. And
Sure.
I think that's what people forget. It's just like we want to go to our corners, and to our boxes, to our races, whatever it might be. And I think we have to sort of change that conversation and open it up and say, no, let's.
Little give and take.
Yeah, I want to
listen
invite
to
you.
understand,
Yeah.
not listen to respond.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's just breaking bread with somebody.
Yeah.
That you normally wouldn't.
Oh, you said it right there, breaking bread. Speaking of breaking bread, not to cut you off, but a lot of my followers, so we have tons of followers are going to be seeing you this weekend because of the great movie Blood and Blood Out. I have tons of our guests and event goers. They come for the food. So I want to touch on Blood and Blood Out. Obviously, everybody always wants to talk to you about Blood and Blood Out. But I have a very unique question for you. Hopefully it's unique. I don't know if a lot of people don't know that some of the actors were actually put up in a house. I believe in Boyle Heights. Mm-hmm. Were you one of those actors?
No, that's the three boys. That was
Okay.
So they put him. That was Taylor Hackford, the director.
Sure.
Put Damien, Jesse, and Benjamin Bratt.
Okay.
Cruz, Paco and
Sure.
Miklo in a house with a well-known, respected ex-gang member.
Gotcha.
So that and then they made him live in Boyle Heights for a month.
Wow.
So they could, hear the gunfire at night. They could, could
Live it,
really
yeah.
live what they were going to play.
Did you ever get a chance to hang out or?
No, I didn't know. I did the other full immersion for me was we went to San Quentin. So
Sure.
when you see the film, and I know the true fans know this, but when they say San Quentin, we're in San Quentin.
Correct.
Everybody you see around us in the scenes, those are real convicts. We're not protected or guarded. As a matter of fact, we had to sign no hostage policies, every one of us. So if they took one of us hostage, they weren't going to give up the warden for one of us, or, so we were part of the prison system. The only thing we didn't do was sleep there.
Right.
Because there was no room. I mean, it's like San Quentin was originally built for 2,500 inmates.
And it was overpopulated.
When we were there, it was 5,500. So it was intense. And so for us as actors, I think why you got the performances and why this film remains an iconic movie, and there's iconic characters from the movie
Sure.
that people still relate to, is because there's so much truth in the movie. And the truth was coming through the actors, through the words of the poet Jimmy
Definitely.
Santiago Baca, who wrote Blood and Blood Out,
Correct.
who taught himself to read and write in prison.
Right.
So there's so many different variables, but that was Taylor who it was very smart to put those three actors, because it's some have history. I mean each one of them had their own history. I think Damien has a little bit of a history of kind of a rough thing, and Jesse
Yeah.
has his story, and Benjamin is some, but they're still, it's like taking Hollywood and putting them in Boyle Heights is
Yeah,
a whole different thing.
And that was so ahead of its time. That's what
Yeah.
made it a part of our pop culture with Latinos. I think that made it worthwhile. So, question for you: how did you get to the point of becoming an actor? I mean, you were in NFL, and how did you fall into acting?
So what a lot of people don't know is, so the last family I lived with in high school was another Cuban family, and their last name is Echevarria. Their son became an actor, but nobody could say Echevarria in Hollywood, so he's Stephen Bauer. So if you ever saw Scarface,
Yeah.
he's Manny. He's Manolo.
Okay, yeah,
he's,
yeah.
He's Pacino's sidekick in the film. So when I got cut by the Dolphins, he knew I'd always wanted to try acting, and my degree's in criminology. I wanted to go into the FBI, but he said, listen, before you become a cop, why don't you, I have an extra room. Why don't you come out to Hollywood? And so I did.
So you lived with Manolo.
So I yeah. So,
Oh
so,
my
so
God.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we were, I moved to Hollywood, and he told me I said, what do I do? And because I had no training, and he said, try to get cast in a play. So I did this play, and my character was deaf and dumb, so I never said a word the entire play. But I was on stage for the entire production, and the head of MGM casting came to see the lead in our play. And he said, I know you didn't say anything. He said, but you have a very powerful presence. Who's your agent? And I said, I don't have one.
Okay.
And he said, do you have a SAG card? That's the Screen Actors Guild card, which is it's a catch-22 to get it.
Right.
And I said, no, I don't have a SAG card either. And he said, call me on Monday. And he gave me my first job.
Beautiful.
And back then, the way you got into the union is that you had to say something on camera that the camera sees, and then that's how you get into the union. So I was on doing a Robert Blake show, an old actor, and it was a drug scene downtown, and my drug was speed. I was selling speed. And so as the actor was coming, the star, Robert Blake, was walking down the sidewalk, I just leaned forward a little bit so the camera could see me, and I went, speed? One word. That was my first job.
What year was that?
1980, I think 2 or 3. And then my
Wow.
second job, I said 2 words. And that was, I did Different Strokes with Gary Coleman and that whole thing. And they had gone to the bank to deposit some money, and there was a holdup. And so they were being held hostage.
In the show, A Different Strokes?
Yeah, Different Strokes.
Wow.
That was the premise. And so I was the SWAT captain who comes in and to free them.
Wow.
And I said, freeze, police. That was
Sure.
my second. I said 2 words. So the bug bit, but I, like every other actor or any artist, as a matter of fact, you struggle. and in that struggle, you have to find other things to do to pay the rent.
Yeah.
So Andy Garcia and I are good friends. We've known each other for 40 years. We both were movers. We worked for a moving company. Him and I. We didn't know what we were doing, but we were movers.
Wow.
I was a bartender. I was a bouncer. I've done copper roofing. I've dug ditches. And actually, the first time I ever got fired from a job was digging ditches with little tiny Mexican guys. And at the end of the day, they fired me because I was too slow. And I was like, and I couldn't keep up with them.
Yeah.
They were much, because I was in the hot sun and whatever. And I was like mad because I was like, wait, I'm an ex, football player. And they go, doesn't matter. You're not moving fast enough.
Speed, right?
So
Wow.
I got fired. But so I've done, so it was basically about 10 years of getting a job here as an actor or getting a job there as an actor. But it wasn't until I hit like my 30s where I started really working a lot.
Sure.
And also by then I had trained, and because remember when I started acting I had no training.
Right.
So
Now, at that time, from what I hear, and I've seen a lot of podcasts with other actors and whatnot, especially Latino actors, I hear the word marginalized a lot. Do you think that it's gotten better? Do you think it's still about the same? Because, I mean, let's face it, we don't have a lot of Latino actors out there really putting us in the limelight and not getting painted as a
Right.
cholo and
right.
whatnot.
So that's the industry that for instance the industry will they allow to have like the favorite flavor. So like as an example, there was a point where Andy Garcia was, exploding. He had done Godfather and blah blah blah, and he was representative because he was Latino. And then they said, okay, let's go to Antonio Banderas. And so as opposed to having, why can't we have 10, 15, 20
Sure.
actors? I've always said that until we're wearing the suits, we won't call the shots.
Correct.
And so it's starting to happen. And I'll give you an example. Last year you had Flaming Hot, with, Eva Longoria directing.
Correct.
And, you had, Richard Montanez's, story. So we're starting to be able to tell other stories
Sure.
because we're starting to control the, we certainly have marketing power. We know that all the commercials are, you'll
Yep.
see, they're focused on Latinos. Here's the problem, and here's how. This is that conversation we were talking about earlier. How do we bring somebody to the table? How do we break bread with them? Problem with our Latino culture is that we are so divided also.
Yes.
So like when we went to Miami to show Blood and Blood Out, which is my community where I went to high school and stuff, the audience loved the film, and then they said, would you support this film? And the Cubans in the audience said, no, because it's not our story. And I'm going, until we put butts in the seats, when a Flaming Hot comes out, whether you're Mexican, whether you're Puerto Rican, Cuban, it doesn't matter. We have to put people in the seats. That's why, like Tyler Perry became this huge, force because of his, the one character that he did. But that's because everybody went to the theater on opening weekend
Supported.
and made it a box office hit.
Sure.
And so Blood and Blood Out is a perfect example. Disney, a lot of people don't know this, was the ultimate studio.
Right.
It says Hollywood Pictures. That's just an arm of Disney.
Right.
We turned it in. Disney flipped out, and we were only in the movie theaters for 7 days, and that's.
But that was because of all the stuff going on at that time. When
There was
LA
Rodney
riots
King.
and
There
Rodney
was,
King.
there was, and they were afraid, and then there was they had a screening in Vegas, and somebody got shot, but it had nothing to do with the film. It was like outside,
Right.
But it just, they just buried the film. So the fact, the fact is, this movie, which it just so happens that May 1st. Disney decided that we could stream the film again.
Yeah.
And so now, suddenly, I mean, my college football player roommate, had been wanting to see the film for 30 years, and he couldn't find it. And he watched it on May 1st. The first thing is, as soon as I put it on my social media pages, him and his wife, streamed it and watched it, and they were like, "Oh my God!" Now I know why everybody, because he sees all the stuff. He sees
Right.
all the, the craziness the film.
It's an iconic film.
Yeah.
So if you're watching right now, you guys, if you guys are going to be here with us this weekend, Cinco de Mayo weekend, 2024, Magic is going to be with us both days. Watch that film. Please support it. Spread the news. Really quick, because we have a lot of foodies, I'm going to ask you some foodie questions. Do you cook?
Yes.
What's your favorite thing to cook? What's your favorite meal to eat? What kind of a foodie are you?
Well, so I love cooking Italian because it's just really, really easy. But I grew up watching my mom cook, so without her even showing me, I was just watching from the kitchen, and so I learned to cook. I call it through osmosis, and so I can there's things that I can cook. I make a mean black beans and rice, and I can do arroz con pollo,
Okay.
so yeah, that's Italian would be my first go-to, but I can cook Cuban food.
Now you travel a lot. You do a lot of these meet and greets, and obviously you're a world traveler. Favorite foodie city? Do you have one?
Well, I have to say that like one of my bucket lists things is I always wanted to go to Italy. So a year and a half ago, I got to go to. I spent like 16 days in Italy, and
Nice.
one of the areas we spent the most time in was Tuscany.
Okay.
So that's just the cuisine, the cuisine,
Wine.
the wines.
The
I mean,
wine,
it's just
yeah.
it was just extraordinary. But also I spent time in Spain and Portugal. Loved it. But, I've never had. I live in Santa Monica, so I'm across the street from the ocean. I can look out my window and see the ocean.
Beautiful.
So I got fresh seafood, but I've never had seafood like I've had in Portugal and
wow.
Spain. The only way I can tell you is that even though it's cooked and presented, you can still taste the ocean.
Okay.
Somehow. So
Sure.
so that would be my trips to Europe was something I've always wanted to do, but especially because I've always loved Italian. My time in Tuscany was great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. When you were filming Blood In, Blood Out, speaking of food, did you were you guys eating like in San Quentin? Were you guys eating what the prison mates were eating?
No, so we had our own little catering, but here's because the inmates know how to call the shots because we were in their house. It wasn't the warden's house. It wasn't the guard's house. It was their house.
Sure.
So like a lot of people don't know this, but the scene, the very first scene that you see us in the cafeteria, and when I do
Right.
I do the whole boogeyman thing and whatever, that's the very first scene we shot in San Quentin.
Oh, wow.
And they have there's so many inmates that they have to do 3 lunches.
Yeah.
Because they can't bring them. So they just brought in 1,000 inmates, and they didn't say, let's introduce the actors. They just said, we're rolling, and we started filming. And so all that was done in the first moment. And so they got to eat whatever we were eating at that, because it was cafeteria food. But after that, when we would go to our little like honey wagon or whatever, where they were making our food, and they would give the inmates that were all working with us little sack lunches, and they after like the 3rd or 4th day, they go, we ain't working unless you guys eat.
Oh.
And so they started eating with us.
What kind of food were you having?
It wasn't anything special. It might be like a breakfast burrito, or it might be whatever. But it was like the
I specifically heard sushi was on that wagon before. Is that correct?
No, I don't recall. I don't recall sushi. But I'll give you an example. So there's a scene in the movie where I get really mad at Big Al because he's not giving me my pork chop.
Right.
And I say, we so you got to know that the inmates gave me that. They told me, they said we get meat once a year that we can recognize, like
Right.
a pork chop or a steak.
Sure.
So if somebody takes that from you, you might kill them. And so that's why I get so angry is because they fed that
It's
to
authentic,
me,
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
authentic, and so that's just an example because usually it's just mystery meat, and it's just like usually just whatever they make everything
It's
into
slop,
a stew
yeah,
of slop,
Yeah.
So
Wow.
but I will tell you the other thing, and this is the innovative because we're talking about food. I don't know how they get away with this because you're everything is contraband. You can't do things. But on the tier where like each tier had the like the whites up here, they had the blacks, and the Mexicans, and whatever. There was one of the cell blocks that we worked at. There was one guy in there who could take a roll of toilet paper and make like a small little Bunsen burner. that would just like it would like, and it would be like this long flame that would just came.
Yeah.
And then the beds are metal.
Yeah.
And he would just
And
pull his
cook on
mattress
it.
back. He was cooking on it,
Yeah,
making little carnitas and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
then people would give him cigarettes, and that because that's the collateral in prison.
Yeah.
And I'm going, I could smell it, like out on the tier. I mean, why aren't the guards like, But they got away with it. But this guy was like cooking on his bed.
Oh man, so I not to talk too much about my past, but I was supposed to do 4 months in boot camp, and the state's attorney lost my paperwork. So I ended up spending 1 year and 8 months in Statesville Correctional, and because I was a boot camper, they couldn't let me. The boot campers were divided from general population, so we were in the hole basically. And instead of just waiting there 2 weeks to get to boot camp, they kind of forgot about me. So then they just put me in reg population, and it's those prison burritos are something to talk about when you're making them in the toilets or stuff.
However
you get very
right. So that's
Mexican ingenuity, man.
There were things that we learned while we're in there, like like San Quentin, the bars used to be just bars, and now they have bars with there's grates in front of it, and that's because some guy had a beef with one of the guards, and he was also going to wood shop, and he had taken a magazine, and he kept twisting the magazine till it got about this long, and then he was shellacking it with lacquer, and it was a harpoon, and he harpooned the guard and killed him.
Yeah.
With a magazine.
Has any of the stuff that you learned on that set, has it came in handy in life?
I mean, like I would just say it just changed the way I look at things. It changed the way I look at incarceration. I would say there's nothing that what I didn't see, and this is interesting because when we were in San Quentin in 91, the film came out in 93, but we were shooting in 91. What I saw is it was the most notorious prison in the state of California at that time.
Right.
Today, it's the most rehabilitative prison in the state of California. If you want to get rehabilitation, go to San Quentin because they're teaching them entrepreneurial skills. Like, you can come out because nobody's going to hire you yet. This big sign over your head says convict, ex-convict, or whatever. So they're teaching them, like a lot of these guys are starting like, rug cleaning companies or, whatever. And that's, it just changed my way of how I look at humanity. And and every single guy that I talked to in San Quentin had family violence in their background like I did.
Right.
And so there's a reason why they're there.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, I think that, that's what I learned. As far as yes, they're innovative, they create stuff. And, but I think more importantly, I learned a lot about trust and brotherhood and I think all of us did. Each actor that Billy Bob Thornton was, he was thrust into the Aryan Brotherhood at a time when his fiance was black. I mean, he's a Billy Bob. I mean, he's from Arkansas. He's the real deal. But he's not a racist, and yet he had to he couldn't say anything because they would have taken him out.
Right.
And so all of us, I think we all learned so much in the process of just being there, and it kind of changed. It took me about a month to shake magic when I got home. My wife, she didn't quite recognize me. I wasn't violent to her or anything like that, but I was just dark.
Yeah.
I'd seen such inhumanity in that prison that
energy stuck with you.
Yeah, it just stuck with me for a while. So yeah.
Now, all of you guys, I've never seen a movie where the cast gets together often and does podcasts and does meet and greets. You guys seem to be very close. Was it because you guys were, for lack of better terms, you guys were pretty much in like a life or death situation? You guys were in a place where, that energy lingered, right? Do you guys still keep in touch the way that we see it in the podcast and all that, or is it just in other words, you just call them up and hang out, or? Well,
then, it kind of depends on. So I was going a lot to, as an example, to San Antonio, and Jesse's from San Antonio, and Adan Hernandez, excuse me, he's the artist on the film.
Right.
So they lived in San Antonio. So when I was there, I'd see them, and so we do get together occasionally. And then certainly the podcasts and some of the anniversary events that they've had. There's a new. A lot of people don't know this, but there's a Blood and Blood Out coffee table book that just came out.
Right.
That's like $60. It's the publishing is called, the place is called Hat and Beard Press.
Okay.
And the book is stunning. It is like high quality. The four authors on it are Taylor Hackford, the director, Jimmy Baca, the writer.
Oh, wow.
Merrick Morton, who did all the photos. So whenever you see those photos of us from inside, that's Merrick Morton. So and he shoots all the gang life in L.A. So if you go to his page, you'll see like some of his work, and then Adon Hernandez, who passed away about a year and a half ago. But his artwork is in the book, and it is stunning. It's like
I can't wait to see
it's
that.
red. It's like like this tablecloth,
Sure.
and it's it's a coffee table book size. It's a big book. That's so for the fans out there, if, look it up. You just put in Blood and Blood Out coffee book, and it should pop up.
I'm hoping to make it to Albuquerque to meet with Jimmy Baca soon. Hopefully, I can make that happen this year.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to have to take note, Teresa, so you can order that. We're going to wrap this up soon. Really quick. Have you found happiness?
Oh yeah. I mean, so
what is happiness to you?
Well, I mean, to me, people ask me, like, because I've been an actor, I've been an author, I've been an activist, I've been a spokesperson, I've been all these things, and I'm really proud of those all of those accomplishments. But the thing that makes me the happiest, and the thing that gives me the most pride, is the title of father. And so I started. We
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
My ex-wife, excuse that's me. My ex-wife and I, we started late, and so we had our son Eli when we were 39, and Eli that was the moment in my life that I knew the cycle of violence had been broken, because I'd never been a father before. And so we only had the one child, but he went on. He decided that he wanted to join me in speaking, starting at 5.5 years old.
Oh wow!
And so he joined me and became very involved in those type of social activities, and was an incredible student. He graduated from Harvard, and he's graduating from law school in 2 weeks. I'm going to D.C. to Georgetown Law, and he's going to get married this year. And so that's the thing that brings me great happiness. And also, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so, you have to, once you realize that, you should live every day and tell the people around you that you care about, tell them what you feel, and then check in with others. Because I lost somebody recently to suicide, who was, people were watching over him just because he had issues, but they still, a lot of times they'll swallow it. So, happiness to me is just living every day, and so yeah.
Amen. Are you a spiritual person?
I am, but in many different ways. So obviously I was brought up Catholic. My ex-wife is Jewish, so my son was bar mitzvahed, so he calls himself a Jubin. and
Jubin from Harvard.
But I've doing a lot of yoga over the last, like, say, 6 or 7 years of yoga, and so I find spirituality in all different areas. And I as a matter of fact, we talk about New Age, like New Age philosophy. Well, New Age is Native American.
Yeah.
And so I played a half-breed Lakota Sioux Indian in a film, and so I did a lot of research on that, and I realized a lot of the stuff that I was listening to about that was New Age was how the Native Americans, like the fact that they give that everything has a life, everything has a spirit, a tree, the buffalo, all of those things, and so I take from everything. And so that's where I get my spirituality. It's like I have the base faith that I learned, with Catholicism, but I also think that it's improving because of the Pope. I think he's a little more progressive, but I also think that it can be a little archaic.
Sure.
And so we have to move, so that we embrace everyone, because I'm older than you. So remember, I grew up in a time of racism.
Yeah.
I grew up in a time of homophobia,
Yeah.
and all those things. And now I've evolved to be totally accepting. We have mixed races in our families. We certainly have gay and lesbian people in our families,
Right.
and so you either accept them and embrace them because they're your family, they're your blood, or you shun them and make them and then and drive them away.
Yeah.
So
And that just brings about more negative energy.
right, and
more
that's
negative-
again, that's part of finding spirituality. I like I read a lot of the Stoics. The Stoics are the Greek philosophers
Right.
from the old, and so I get something from everywhere.
Good,
Yeah.
good to hear. It sounds like you're very well-rounded, and I love that about you. So, I looked at you here, and now it makes me look at you even here. So, I greatly appreciate your presence. I greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us here in Rockford. If you could give somebody like me some advice in life, what would it be?
I would just say don't take anything for granted. It's just especially now that I'm getting older, I'm losing people.
Same,
guy.
yeah.
And so that it's just life, and so I would just say it's really, I think, and this is a Stoic thing. The Stoics were all about making righteous choices and virtue, about character. And so that's that. Like if you're striving to be a good person, a good character, a good man, a good husband, a good community activist, all the different things all the different hats you wear, then that's how we create a more humane and peaceful world. We
Amen.
each have to be involved, and so that's like you are making a difference. A lot of times people think, well, I can't make a difference. I'm not a big star, or I'm not. No, it's like you can make a difference in a child's life by putting your arm around it, telling that child, wow, you really did that well. That might be the first time that child ever heard that, because that's my story.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. I've definitely heard that before,
Yeah.
coming out of my own in my history. Actually, in the last 48 days. But it's really an uphill battle. But I'm definitely gonna roll with that,
Yeah.
Victor.
Cool.
Thank you again. We're gonna wrap this up, you guys. I know that you're tired. You've been traveling all day. You guys, for everybody watching, please stay tuned. We're gonna have Victor here May 4th and 5th, tomorrow and the next day at 5909 the Old Kmart, East 8 Mulford, Rockford, Illinois, Cinco De Rockford. As a reminder, it's only $1 to get in, guys. The proceeds benefit not just one, but two, but three local nonprofits. Come out, have some food, get a book signing, get your autograph, get a picture with Magic, and hopefully, Magic, you join us in the future and bring some friends.
All right.
We'll see about Tamale Fest. We're going to talk off
Okay.
camera here in a
All
minute.
right.
Until next time, people, love, peace, and taco grease.